Today, I'm trying out something I've never used before. Spray paint with a crackle effect. I'm using it in a turning project I'm really excited about. I'm going to test how this paint behaves, try a few color combinations and see how it looks on a curved form. I'll also be using a brand new jaw chuck kit that really stands out from others I've seen, and I'll show you a few useful chucking techniques along the way. This is one of those projects where, even when it looks like things aren't going quite the way you planned, it's worth sticking with it. Sometimes the best results come when you trust the process and carry it through to the end. Let's get started. Because the crackle paint I'm using has sort of a rustic reddish-brown tone to it, I went through my blank collection and found one with a little red in the grain. With any luck, the colors will play well together. But as with most finishes, you never really know until you reach the final step. I'm taking inspiration from a project I made a while ago, a candle holder with a round, heavy form. It ended up being a favorite in my family, and it still sits on the coffee table in the living room. It's simple, but it has a nice presence. I'm hoping that shape will work just as well in this project. So I'll begin by roughing this piece into a UFO shape, wide and flat with some soft curves. Before we move on, I want to mention a tool that's become a regular part of my turning lately, the negative rake scraper. I use it to refine both the outside and inside of the bowl, especially when I'm getting close to final form. It leaves a clean surface and it's much easier to control than a traditional scraper, especially on tricky grain. I'll link to it in the description if you haven't got one already. Once I finish the form, I sand the surface down to about 240 grit. That gives me a smooth base before applying friction polish. I always use friction polish when I'm planning to add lacquer or any kind of specialty paint. It helps seal the surface and it prevents the fibers from racing when the finish goes on. After the polish has cured, I go over it once more with 400 grit to finish off before painting. Now, crackle paint works by separating as it dries, creating a sort of weathered, broken surface. But for that to work, it needs a base layer of acrylic paint underneath. The base color is what shows through the cracks. I wasn't sure which base color would work best, so I decided to do a quick test before committing to the final piece. I found 3 gloss acrylics in the shop, white, grey and black, and used each one on the test board. After 2 coats of base, I sprayed on the crackle paint. This is my first time trying it, so I wasn't sure how thick to go. Turns out the crackling process starts almost immediately and you don't get much time for adjustments, so the first layer has to count. Let's take a look at the results. The white base cracked very heavily, lots of fine flakes. It looked interesting, but also quite busy. The white was a bit too strong and ended up competing with the color of the crackle paint itself. It just didn't feel balanced. The grey base was more subtle. The color combination was nice, but the crackle effect was barely visible, so while it looked clean, it didn't really give me the texture I wanted. The black base was the most striking. It gave the best contrast and the cracks really stood out. The color of the crackle paint sat nicely on top without being overwhelmed or muted. That's the one I'll use for the final piece. Just like in the test, I start by applying 2 layers of the black gloss base. Then I go in with a thicker coat of the Crackle paint. I'm hoping that slightly heavier layer will produce wider, more visible cracks this time. As expected, the effect starts almost instantly. You can see it developing as the paint dries. Let's have a look when it's all dry. It's dramatic and bold, but it's also a bit uneven in places. I think that's because of the curve of the surface and a thicker layer of paint. Gravity pulls down just enough to make some areas crack more heavily than others. Not quite the uniform texture I had in mind, but I'm not too worried. I'll be turning away a fair amount of material, and if I can get a clean transition between the paint and the unpainted areas, the unevenness may still look good. As you can see, my masking job wasn't that good, and the paint made it to the underside of the bowl. Good thing I was going to work a bit more on this side before switching the mount. I'll sand it clean after I prepare the tenon for the jaw chuck. I will also have to clean up the rim of the bowl to a clean, precise edge. I had the masking tape a bit below the rim, so I could trim the edge with sanding. Now it's time to mount the piece more securely. Up to this point, I've only been using the drive center. This is a good moment to introduce the new chuck kit I just got. It's from Vevor, and I have to say, it's impressive. It includes a wide range of jaws and accessories, and it's significantly less expensive than most of the other kits I've come across. About a third of the price, actually. If you're getting into wood turning, I usually suggest getting your lathe first, then your basic turning tools, a sharpening system, and after that, a jaw chuck is one of the best upgrades you can make. It gives you a lot more freedom with how you mount and shape your pieces. For example, this little flask here was turned using only a jaw chuck. I'll be doing a more in-depth look at this kit in the future video, but if you want to check it out now, there's a link in the description. With the piece mounted securely, I can now begin shaping the inside. I take it slow, since a catch at this point would ruin the finish and the whole project really. As I work, I can already see the uneven crackle effect is starting to grow on me. It has a kind of natural, aged look that works well with the color of the wood. I'm curious to see how everything ties together once the oil goes on. To finish the bottom, I need a different setup. Because of the shape of the rim, I can't use my large jaws like I normally would, so I'm going to use a jam chuck instead. I start with a piece of 2x4 and rough it down to a cylinder between centers. Once it's round, I mount it on the jaw chuck and then shape the edge into a soft, shallow curve. I don't sand the surface. In fact, I leave it intentionally rough. If the surface is too smooth and hard, it can leave pressure marks on the inside of the bowl when I press the piece against it. With the jam chuck shaped, I bring up the tailstock and gently press the bowl into place using the live center. That holds it securely while I clean up the bottom, leaving just a small nub in the center that I can remove and sand by hand later. Finally, I can breathe a bit easier. The piece made it through the process without any catches or issues, and I think it looks great already. Now it's time for the final step, applying the oil finish to the wood and seeing how it all comes together. This is always a satisfying moment. As the oil soaks in, the grain comes alive, the color deepens, and the piece finally reveals itself. I'm really happy with how this turned out. The crackle texture, the soft curves, the warm tones in the wood, it all works together. The paint doesn't overpower the piece, instead it adds character and contrast. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this project and maybe even picked up a tip or two along the way. If you liked this project, feel free to give it a thumbs up or leave a comment. I always enjoy hearing your thoughts. See you in the next one.